The trial of former CBC host Jian Ghomeshi got underway this week here in the province's capital city. But what dominated headlines and set social media ablaze was the perception of a victim on trial. To help get beyond the furor to a better understanding of how our criminal justice system handles sexual assault cases, we're joined by criminal defense lawyer Marcy Siegel. Thanks for coming in.
Thanks for having
Helping
me.
us out with this. Okay, Jian Ghomeshi's lawyer, Marie Henin, is obviously a well-known, very skillful lawyer. And part of her strategy, it seems, over the first couple of days was to sort of try to get the witness on the stand, the complainant, to admit she lied. You lied about this, right? You lied about this. Why take that approach?
Because we're talking about credibility. That is a central issue in this trial. And I don't think she wants to call Mr. Ghomeshi to the stand. So if he were to testify at the trial, the judge would have to determine it's a three-pronged test. If you believe the accused, you must acquit. If you don't believe the accused but are left in a reasonable doubt, you must acquit. If you totally disbelieve the evidence, you still have to look at the complainant's evidence or all the evidence as a whole to determine guilt. So if he's not testifying, then you're left with basically one tier of the three-pronged test, which is, can you believe the complainant? So you're better off, your case is only as good as before your client testifies. Because inevitably, when anybody's on the witness stand, even a police officer, it's nerve-wracking. And you aren't going to remember everything when you're on the stand. So if you can win the case, as defense counsel say, without having to call your client, that's the best position to be in.
This is a case, of course, that is not going before a jury. It is just the judge only. But having said that, we're all people and people are influenced by a bunch of different things. And I want to ask whether or not you think the fact that Marie Henin is a female lawyer interrogating female complainants has an impact.
So having been a lawyer for 26 years doing criminal law, the rule of thumb I've always known to hear from potential clients or clients and other lawyers is, on a case of sexual assault, better to have a woman defense lawyer. I don't agree, but that's what the rule of thumb is, because you look less of a bully as a woman who's cross-examining another woman than you do if you're a man cross-examining a woman. It's more fair game, as they say.
And has that been your experience as well?
I think if you're a good criminal lawyer, be it a man or a woman, you can take on any case as long as you're comfortable with it. I don't think I agree, although there is a rule of thumb also that sometimes when a man cross-examines a woman in a fatherly sort of role, that may be intimidating as well, and the complainant may back down somewhat because she thinks she's hearing from her father.
Gotcha. You know David Butt, criminal defense lawyer?
Of course, excellent lawyer.
You guys all know each other. I know you do. Okay, here's David writing in the Globe and Mail saying, proof beyond a reasonable doubt is an essential safeguard against convicting innocent people. But it is such a high standard that a judge must acquit an accused person even if he probably committed the crime. The victim can be highly believable, but if the accused is even remotely so, the law says a conviction will never happen. So the credible victim, already feeling abused by her assaulter, feels abused again during cross-examination, then feels tossed aside by the judge who has a reasonable doubt. No wonder victims stay away in droves. Fair point?
It's an interesting point. I don't necessarily disagree with him. However, I wouldn't want to change the burden of proof in a criminal trial. Although I do agree that for the lay person, sometimes if you rely on the verdict to guide you in life, it's a false perception because it's all about the game. In other words, it's all about the climb, as Miley Cyrus would say. If you show yourself you have the guts and the commitment to go to court and to testify as to what happened to you, whether or not you're believed shouldn't take away from how you feel inside.
But sure, except after...
You're not buying that.
Well, it's not a matter of me not buying it. It's 300 reporters covering this thing, and that's just not the way it's being portrayed or the way it looks, right?
It looks I'm not going to be critical of social media. However, as a general principle, it looks as if it's all about whether or not she's been knocked out, the first complainant. And most of the media reports seem to talk about the fact that this woman obviously is a liar, and, you know, look what a great job Ms. Hennon, who was an excellent lawyer, did, and 1 down, 2 to go. And I don't think that's fair to her. I don't
Fair
think
to whom?
To the complainant.
Because?
Because it's about her telling her story and a judge to make a decision. And it's easy for you and me, I'm not saying you are, who are not in the courtroom to be Monday morning quarterback to talk about whether or not she was believable or not. Plus, some would say that it was immaterial if she had extensions on or not. I mean, I don't have high school hair, which means that I've changed my hair many times over the years. I don't remember how my hair was like a few years ago. However, if it wasn't a statement that she reviewed and then she forgot about that, then that could be something consequential. But part of, unfortunately, the role of cross-examining a complainant in a sex assault trial is to sort of wood chip away at her or his credibility.
Sorry, what does that mean, wood chip away?
You know, start to find little inconsistencies, and one begets the next and begets the next, and you start with 1 and now you have 7. But the 7 inconsistencies could be so immaterial as it is that you get nowhere. I think the public's perception, based on how this trial has been reported, is that she was a liar, she was not believable, and that Ms. Hennon was able to show that to the judge and to the public, and she's the heroine.
Here's what Ann Kingston, writing in Maclean's magazine, had to say about this. No one asks the victim of a mugging why they handed over their wallet, or what they were doing in that neighborhood, or question whether the crime even took place. We know false claims are the anomaly, 2 to 8%, according to FBI studies, yet disbelieving the complainant remains the norm. Why?
Well, in a criminal trial, as you know, if you get convicted of something like sexual assault, the penalties are severe. You're most likely to get a criminal record, go to jail, and be on the sex registry. And we all know now with social media how easy it is to disseminate that information. Pedophiles, for instance, when they come into a neighborhood, it's publicized. But the social stigma and the stigma to your reputation from getting convicted of sexual assault is so grave to individuals, whether they're guilty or not, that it is something for which is that important to get an acquittal if you can.
I get that, but if you consider the other side of it, this alleged crime is different from 2 guys punching each other out in a bar. You'll grant that, right?
In every way.
This is really very different. So one wonders whether there ought not to be sort of, I don't want to say a different burden of proof, but different circumstances or a different way of handling, you know, a bar punch out as there would be, you know, in this case here.
Okay, well, 2 points. One, the Supreme Court of Canada, by bringing out the Rape Shield law.
Which is what?
Basically what they're saying is you can't ask a complainant who else they've had sex with, how many times they've had sex with the accused, if the allegations are they had sex on 1 occasion. So there are real safeguards, okay, to prevent a complainant from being called, let's say, easy, so to speak. That would have been used in my days. Or, you know, less likely to be believed because if she's had sex with so many people, she must have wanted it from that person. So we can't do that. Plus, it's really hard to get certain records of a complainant, their therapist records, their diaries. There's a lot of safeguards in that regard as well. So that's fair to the complainant in my view. The flip side is that, you know, maybe part of the problem is that instead of using the criminal court as much, that the civil courts should be utilized more, that maybe it's a fair game to sue the accused or the individual civilly. Now, if they have no money, then it's all for naught. And I agree with you on that one. But I think part of the problem is that it's the integrity of the process that is important. So that if people stop reporting that they've been sexually assaulted because they're less likely to get a conviction, then doesn't it beget more abuse to women? Sometimes you have to keep fighting in spite of the fact that so far the stats aren't that great. And with all due respect, determining the statistics, just because somebody says they've been sexually assaulted or not sexually assaulted, almost inevitably nobody's there to witness it. So how are we to know that in fact those stats are accurate? But I do agree with you that it's it seems like with this trial coming out that women are somehow taking a step back in terms of their rights.
Well, the issue is re-victimized. I mean, they would allege they were victimized in the first place, and now they come to court and they're trying to have their moment of justice, and it looks as if they're being victimized all over again. Would you agree that's a sort of a fair reading of it?
Yes, but here's another answer. Instead of changing the burden of proof, because you can't do it for one if not other sections, get more money for the complainants, for victim services, get more resources for crowns, get more resources for police, and of course, the flip side is for accused people as well, that they can get legal representation. I do believe that there just isn't enough money. And nobody wants to pay more money for the criminal justice system. You ask anybody on the street, more often than not, they think somebody's charged is guilty. People, say to me, my clients are scumbags. I don't consider them scumbags. They are individuals that are accused, or if they've been found guilty, they are to be sentenced. Now, obviously, if they're guilty, they are less deserving of the same rights in the justice system because the presumption's no longer there. But just because somebody's been charged doesn't mean that they are going to be found guilty.
Well, let's see if we can find some other options here. I think, is it 2 of the first 3 witnesses are not having their identity published?
Yes,
I think that's the case.
Although yesterday, Lucy, I'm sorry, I forgot her last name, whose identity is not being, because she decided to come out, she actually testified yesterday, and the third one is yet to testify, whose identity is not going to be revealed.
Right, but would there be a way of doing it? And maybe this is a ridiculous idea, you tell me.
I would never think you're being ridiculous.
Well, I'm just trying to explore options here. Is there a more private way of doing this so that women who find themselves in these circumstances don't feel re-victimized?
There is a procedure in the criminal code that you can testify behind a screen or from another room. That's done more often than not with child complainants. But there is the ability to do so if, for instance, there's a real concern that they are going to be intimidated by having to look at the accused person. But I really do think that the money is best spent in having victim services or having the complainants have their own lawyer, so they just aren't interviewed a week before the trial, so that months before there's a check-in process. They can keep in touch so that they don't feel that they've been forgotten. I think that's what's needed.
What about the notion of a publication ban on some of the details around the testimony? You a fan of that idea?
Look, I think all with good measure. So for instance, yesterday I understand that there was a motion brought to not have the pictures of the first complainant in her bikini posted. I agree. How is that relevant for the public to see what she looked like in a bikini? First of all, she'll be ridiculed however she looks. There'll be mock jokes about her. So yes, I do agree that there needs to be some decorum, class, respect for the system and the individuals. So I agree with that.
Do you find it a bit odd that the Toronto Star initially protected her identity in order to get her to come forward to tell them the story, but now they're in court arguing that that picture ought to be made public for everybody to see because it's somehow germane to reporting the case?
I think there's a lot of pressure, more often than not, to provide salacious details. I think social media has changed so substantially that people, that they want to give what their supporters want.
Is it easy, you've mentioned you've been at this a quarter century now, a little more. Is it easier for women to come forward now than it was when you started practicing?
I think yes. However, the flip side is there wasn't social media when I was younger. I remember when the internet had that buzzword, anyway, I'm not saying it right, not a good singer. But, in the old days, you would be less believed as a woman. If you were touched on the buttocks, for instance, I doubt that anybody would be charged with sexual assault 20-something years ago. It was more of an old boys network, to be honest with you. Now that feminism has come into place, now that equality, cultural sensitivity, I think it is easier per se. However, human nature is what it is. And I think this is a really difficult set of circumstances, not only in this case, but in general, because the ramifications of being told that you're a rapist is so large that I think there are still cynics And I think as a woman, if I was coming into the police station to report a sex assault, I would want a woman police officer. So although it is a lot easier, and the police are taking it a lot more seriously because of the reasons I've told you, I think the flip side.
We're not there yet.
No, and plus the flip side is with social media, be careful what you wish for, because, I mean, there's no holes barred now in what people are saying.
I want to circle back to this rape shield law business that we were talking about a few moments ago. Because, okay, admittedly it is in place in order to prevent details of a woman's sexual history of being inappropriately entered into evidence in a trial such as the one that's happening right now. However, Marie Hinnon, who is representing Ghomeshi in this trial, gave a speech in 1998 in which she said, there's kind of ways around that. And let's roll this tape here and then we'll come back and chat, okay? Sheldon, if you would.
Sometimes you bring the application, especially in front of a judge-alone trial, to introduce all this otherwise inadmissible evidence, and if it's excluded, well, oh well, the judge has heard it. And that's really,
Is that fair?
No, it's I'm absolutely confident that the judge will be able to disabuse his or her mind of the fact that she has a very extensive and lewd prior sexual history.
Are you as confident as she is about the judge's ability to unring the bell?
No, I'm not. I don't agree that that's an appropriate tactic because it is too transparent. I think you only bring an application when you really believe it has merit, and you don't do it so that you can fling some mud at the walls and see what sticks.
Okay. In our last couple of minutes here, let's see what ideas you may have to improve things. Because on the one hand, yes, the burden of proof is high and needs to be met. On the other hand, we don't want to re-victimize women who've been through enough already. So what would you do?
I would really focus on putting a lot more resources towards dealing with the complainants so that they're not seen a week before. I think there should be resources for them to have their own lawyers, if possible. Some can't afford it. Otherwise, there should be a sort of full-time victim services. There just isn't enough resources now where they can feel comfortable and confident coming in from time to time when they're feeling stressed with the situation. So that's number one for sure.
This is such a high-profile case. I mean, the crush of media at Old City Hall downtown is unlike anything anybody's ever seen before. It is, isn't it? You'd think there was nothing else happening in this city, province, country worth covering. But anyway, there we go. I'm wondering whether you think all of the attention this case is getting could therefore potentially constructively have some long-term benefits that might improve things the way you're discussing them.
I'm uncertain because right now I think that it has, in terms of the public, in some ways made a joke of the system. I think we as criminal lawyers, and not because of Ms. Hennon, please don't get me wrong, but what's coming out and what's being tweeted, it makes us look like all we care about is destroying a witness, and we don't care about the process itself. We are part of the process. We have to keep the integrity there. So way too much media, way too much importance, and I wonder if it's become a bit of a dog and pony show, to be honest with you.
We'll keep watching, I'm sure. Marcy Siegel, it's good of you to come into TVO tonight and help us with this. Thanks so much.
Thank you.
Help TVO create a better world through the power of learning. Visit supporttvo.org and make a tax-deductible donation today.